Hi, I'm Andy, and this is my lesson on arrays in Java. In this lesson, we'll discuss what arrays are, how to create them, and how they're stored in memory. Let's get started. In just about every computer program, there are groups of objects that are stored using a single variable. Such groups are called arrays in Java. For example, a word processing document could be stored in the program as an array of string objects. A soccer team in a video game may be represented as an array of soccer player objects. And a set of test scores in a gradebook application may be stored as an array of integers. Arrays are very powerful and very widely used. They allow us to store and access a group of related objects or primitive values using just one variable name. Let's make an array of primitives in our main method here. We start by putting the data type of the array. Let's make this one an integer array. Then we need to put two square brackets. These brackets tell the compiler that this variable represents an integer array, not a single integer. Then we put the variable name. I'll assume this will be an array of test scores. Then we put the assignment operator. To the right of the assignment operator, we need to create the array. We do that with curly braces, followed by our array elements, each one separated by a comma. So that's how you make an array when you know what elements you want it to have. But sometimes we want to create an array before we know its contents. Here's how we do that. Again, we put int with two square brackets, the name of the array and the assignment operator. On the right, we put the keyword new and then the int with the square brackets again. But this time, inside the square brackets, we put the number of elements we intend to store in this array. So these are the two different ways to make arrays in Java. Let's look at the difference between them by discussing what happens in your computer's memory when these two lines of code execute. As always, assume the right side of the equal sign happens first. This bit of code right here carves out space in memory and puts these four numbers in it. Since I like to picture a single integer variable as a small box containing a value, I picture an array of integers as a series of boxes like this. After the array is created and initialized with values, its memory address is returned. The assignment operator takes that address and stores it in the reference variable on its left. Notice this looks awfully similar to how objects and their reference variables are stored in memory. That's because arrays are objects. Just like all objects, they are accessed through their reference variable, although the syntax used will be a bit different. I'll show you how that works in my next lesson. This line of code does something very similar. First, the array is created in memory with the specified number of array locations, or what I like to call slots. Since we didn't specify the values to put into these slots, Java initializes them to a default value. For integer arrays, that default value is 0. Then, just like before, the address to this array is returned and stored in our reference variable. Each of these array locations has an index, a number used to identify that slot within the array. The numbering scheme for array indexes is the same as it is for the characters in a string. It starts at 0. Although arrays are objects, they are somewhat different from class instances. First of all, while arrays do have some methods, they're typically not used very often. Also, while class instances have instance variables, arrays have what we call properties. Actually, arrays really just have one important property called length. To access the length of an array, you use the dot operator. Let's print the value of the length property for both of our integer arrays. As you can see, the length property tells you the number of elements in that array. One word of caution. The length of the array is not the same as the array's last index. Because indexes start at 0, this array's last index is 3, while its length is 4. So we just saw how to make a couple of primitive arrays. We can also make arrays of objects. Let's see how to do that by first making a very simple class called student. The student class will have two instance variables, first name and last name. The constructor for the student class will initialize those instance variables. Lastly, let's add two simple accessor methods to get the values of those instance variables. Okay, now back in main, I want to make an array containing 3 student objects. We'll do that first by using the curly brace notation. Now let's create another student array, this time using new. So now we have two student arrays, but their contents are very different. Let's look at the first array. Notice how object arrays are stored in memory. This is super important. Object arrays do not contain actual objects. They contain references to objects. The actual objects are stored elsewhere in the computer's memory. Now for the second student array. In this array, we only specified the size of the array. We didn't make any actual student objects. That means these array slots do not yet contain any object addresses. Instead, they contain a default value. And the default value for an array of objects is null. Again, it's extremely important to understand the underlying storage mechanisms for arrays of primitives and arrays of objects. I encourage you to draw pictures like I showed you in this lesson whenever you're trying to analyze Java code involving arrays. And that wraps up this lesson on arrays in Java. I'm Andy. Thanks for watching and coding with me today.